good afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us here at the Unmuted Conversations podcast with yours truly, Latasha Renee. It's been a while, at least it feels like it anyway, since we have been together. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in on tonight. We have a really exciting episode on tonight. My show tonight is entitled Church Girls Get Depressed Too. Is that not a mouthful? Yes, it is. So, before I get started, before I explain to you more about the topic, before I jump in, I want you to invite your friends to join us on tonight. I want you to like, comment, and share this podcast. I want you to spread the word on tonight. I won't be on here long simply because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I wanted to honor my word and I wanted to be with you guys on tonight to share my own personal story. I know usually on the Unmuted Conversations podcast, I interview a guest. I allow other people to get on my show and we converse. I allow them to tell their story. But on tonight, we're having a solo conversation in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. We all know that the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I was not going to let this month end without having this very important conversation. So, again, grab your neighbor, grab your sister, grab your friend. Tell her that we are here, the Unmuted Conversations podcast. For those of you who do not know, again, I am Latasha Renee. I am the host, I am the founder of the Unmuted Conversations podcast, where we are obsessed with helping women unmute their message and share their story with the world. I am not excluded from that. So, guess what? Tonight, I'm going to be sharing my own story regarding mental health, what my journey has looked like, how it has affected my relationship with the church, how it has affected my relationship with God. So I'm going to jump right in on tonight. Like I said, like, comment, and share. If I don't get to your comment, I will definitely go back, answer any questions that you may have, anything I got you. But I just wanted to share a little bit of my own story. um, I know some of you may or may not be aware of my relationship concerning the church, concerning mental health, but I want to speak on that a little bit tonight. So if you read my book, my very first book that I wrote back in 2017, I did touch on my mental health. I talked about how at one point I was diagnosed with depression, clinical depression. And I often get asked, well, at what point did you realize that there was something wrong or something going on or, need for concern? Um, for me, in hindsight, I realized that I was probably depressed in high school and stuff like that, because I had a lot of unresolved issues, a lot of unresolved trauma that I had just not dealt with. Kind of swept it under the rug, just kind of kept going because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. The Bible always talks about, and I think it's in the book of Joshua, it talks about being strong and courageous in the Lord. So that's what I thought I was doing. I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm not going to deal with my problems. I'm not going to deal with my issues. I'm just going to keep going. So even as a teen, I had adopted that because I can't really say that I was raised in church. I started going to church when I was 16. I met a girl in high school, and her mom was a pastor. I started, staying with them every weekend. I ended up in church, loved church, was a church girl real quick. But, attending church, going to church, doesn't wipe away, everyday life. And so I still had to live life, and it just was not good at the time. So I probably was having some mental health issues then. I probably battled depression then, but I didn't really know that at the time. I think the first time I really realized that I dealt with depression was in college. I went off to Winston-Salem State University. Lord knows, if you know me, you know that was my dream school. That's all I ever talked about. That's where I wanted to go. I went in as a middle grades education major. You could not tell me I was not going to be an English teacher. That was just what I wanted to do with my life. I kind of thought I had it all planned out. I was born in Winston-Salem, so I had family there, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is gonna be the life. Got to college, not so. Um, I can't necessarily say there was any one particular thing that happened in life. I think it was just a change of scenery. I'm in a place where I'm meeting all these new people. People seem to be further along than me, have more money than me, have, prettier than me, all of the things, and so I'm kind of looking at myself like I'm not good enough. Am I smart enough? All of these things that I never really had questioned about myself prior to college, all of a sudden it became a thing in college. It became a big deal. And I just kind of hit rock bottom. There were times whenever I would not get out of bed. I would just lay in bed all day, wouldn't go to class. And honey, I've always loved school. So that should have been the first red flag, is because I've always loved school, always loved, you know, being learning information. I always had this passion for learning. So I all of a sudden hated going to class. Um, I would just work and stuff like that because, Lord, I was dirt poor back then in college. Didn't really have the best relationship with my parents. So I kind of felt all of the emotions that were attached to that. And I was definitely depressed. And after a couple years in college, I was just like, this ain't for me. Peace out. I'm done. And mind you, during this time, I am in church, very much so. As soon as I moved to Winston-Salem, I immediately found a church home. I'm serving in church. I'm working with the youth ministry. I'm there every Wednesday night, every Sunday. I'm there. Again, I felt like I was depressed, but I wasn't talking about it. Because mind you, this is back in 2000, 2001, 2002. Ain't nobody really talking about that kind of stuff, back then. So it wasn't like I was, telling my pastor, oh, I think I'm depressed. It wasn't that. I was just trying to push through, still go to church, you praise your way through. And I can't even say that no one was really telling me that, because again, I was not being open and honest about what I was feeling. So I just tried to cover up or mask my depression with faith and with God and with church and with scriptures and praise and worship. I was not dealing with anything. And therapy was not a thing back then, at least in my little world. In my little bubble, it was therapies for white people. We know better now, thank God. But back then, therapy wasn't an option. It wasn't even really talked about, to be honest. I don't know if it was in other communities, but I know, I don't want to speak for the entire Black community, but no one in my life, no one in my circle was talking about therapy back in 2001, 2002. Just wasn't a thing. So we just learned to, our remedy, or my remedy, was church. It was pray about it. It was go read your word, renew your mind. And I'm not saying those things are wrong, because they're not. I do think that prayer does play a very important role when it comes to when we go through these challenging things, when we have all of these feelings that make us feel a certain kind of way. Absolutely take that to the Lord. Absolutely get in the word. Absolutely renew your mind. But I think that thankfully, I feel like there has been some evolution when it comes to these things, because thankfully now, I think for the most part, we realize that you can have God and therapy. And that's something that I want to talk about tonight, even as a church girl, because, I am a self-proclaimed church girl. But I'm also very much a big advocate of mental health and therapy, God and therapy. Um, Again, I went through my early 20s struggling mentally. I went through, all of my 20s struggling, early 30s struggling a lot when it came to mainly depression. I was very much a sad girl, angry, and I think my sadness a lot of time looked like anger, but honestly I was really just sad. Didn't really know why at the time, but I was just a sad, mean girl. And I covered it up by going to church. I covered it up by doing ministry. I covered it up by staying busy. Completely unhealthy. And I think by the time I got into my early 30s, um, well, when I was 35, my mom passed away very much unexpectedly. Of course, she did have some illnesses, but we were not expecting her to pass away when she did. And so when she passed away, of course, I went through that whole grief phase, and my grief turned into severe depression. I that whole thing again, I don't want to get out of bed at this then at that point is I don't want to be here. I don't want to live. I don't want to, I wasn't actively trying to find a way to commit suicide or take my own life, but it was just that feeling of I don't want to be here. God, if you decide to take me in my sleep tonight, I'm okay with that. It was those type of thoughts that I would have on an everyday basis. This thing I was always contending with those kind of thoughts, and I just felt like I don't know how I can live without my mom. There has never been a Tasha without a Pam. And I just I could not see a way of being able to navigate life without my mom here. So, and I feel like while some of those feelings are normal, and I'm a normal in, quotation marks, because, grief looks different for a lot of people. But for me, I feel like things for me went beyond just regular grief. I was depressed. I was in a very, very bad place. And so, right after my mom passed, I did go to grief counseling. I went to one session and was like, nah, this ain't for me. That was my first experience with therapy. Did not like it. It was at hospice, and so to me, I was like, we went in there. Everybody in there sad. Everybody's crying. We talk about our loved one, and then we go home, still sad, still crying, if feeling worse actually. So I was like, yeah, nah, I ain't doing this no more. So I didn't, and so I just tried to stay busy. And once again, I ran back to the church because that was my life. That is what I knew. I had already kind of crossed out therapy, and I was just like, nah, this ain't for me. Um, in addition to the depression that I experienced, I started to struggle with anxiety. And that was a new one for me because, shoot, anxiety almost felt like the opposite end of the spectrum from the depression. So now I'm jittery, I'm worried, I'm stressed out about everything. And I remember one way my anxiety showed up was after my mom passed away. I was so afraid to lose other people in my life, the really close people in my life. So everybody, if you know, me and my little sister are very, very close. So at the time, my sister was working for a fast food restaurant in her town, right up the street from her house. But she used to always work really late at night. She would get off late at night. She'd have to go to the bank, do a bank drop. A lot of times she was doing that by herself, and I would be so worried. Like, Deidre, like, are you there? Call me when you leave the store. Are you at the bank? Are you by yourself? Look around, check your surroundings, because I just had this anxious feeling like, oh my God, I don't want nothing to happen to my sister. What if something happens to her? What am I going to do? I can't live without my sister. I just lost my mom. All of those things I felt. And I felt it for months on end. Even like, my everybody knows I'm really close to my godmom. I was like, what are you doing? Where are you at? Call me when you get home. Like I had this heightened sense that something else was going to happen and I was going to lose someone else that I love. That's whenever I first realized that I needed some help with anxiety. So, one day I'm anxious, the next day I'm depressed. It was wild. I went to see a doctor. I got on medication. The medication was making me feel all kinds of things because, it does take a minute sometimes for the medication to work. So I just felt all over the place. Um, and again, at the time, I'm in church, I'm talking to my pastor. Fortunately for me, my pastor was very much trauma informed, I would say. Um, very supportive, very much a listening ear, and all of the things, very supportive of me going to therapy if that was something that I wanted to do. So I was very, very blessed in that arena because I think sometimes that's not everybody's story. I've talked to women, I've talked to people in general where they've gone to their pastor or gone to the church and, they've been told, oh, you don't need to go sit on nobody's couch. You just need to go to the altar. And that is so, I don't even know the word to say, but it's very much insensitive. It's very much not what the person needs to hear at the time, because if we can go to our primary care doctors for high blood pressure or diabetes or headaches or whatever, then we can go to see a psychologist for mental health issues. So, I do know that is dilemma for some people. When it comes to their church, they don't, there is very little support when it comes to seeking mental health avenues. So I do want to hold space for that tonight, because I know everybody's story isn't my story when it comes to that. I did have a good leader at the time who was very, very much supportive of me going to therapy. I really wasn't feeling it at the time because, again, I had that one experience after my mom passed away. So I was just trying to navigate, trying to stay busy in the church. It wasn't until, I moved away to Georgia, it wasn't until I came back to North Carolina whenever I feel like things really got intense for me, because, I had not lived, near my family in years. Like my siblings, my mom, aunts. I hadn't really lived down here on this end of North Carolina in almost 20 years. Actually, over 20 years. Well, right at 20 years, because I moved back to North Carolina in 2020. So it was difficult for me to come back without my mom here, because, again, when my mom passed away, I was living in Winston-Salem. So to be here around my immediate family, my siblings, and my mom wasn't here, I did not expect it to be as hard as it was. But it was difficult. It was so, so, so hard for me. And I started to experience severe depression again. At the time, I was working on a job that was very, very stressful. And, that coupled with my poor mental health at the time, I was spiraling. And so I ended up going into therapy again. And this time it was a better experience, but it was not Christian based or anything like that. And I feel like that's what I needed. I didn't know I needed it at the time, but I definitely did in hindsight. But I went through therapy, and I did start to experience a little bit of relief. I started to feel a little bit better, but then I ended up getting a new job, and so those services ended. So then at the top of 2020, I want to say 2022, I started seeing a new therapist. At this point, this particular therapist was Christian. And so I felt like being able to marry God and therapy was the thing that I needed. It was like all of the puzzle pieces started to fit together. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I needed this entire time. So, because I felt like I was getting the best of both worlds, because ultimately I am a church girl. I love the Lord. I love church. I'm going to be at Bible study. I'm going to be in Sunday service. I'm going to be at prayer meeting and all of the things. That's my life. That's what I love, love, love. But I also knew that I needed some additional support. Not that those things were not working, because they were. The word was working, prayer was working, being at the altar crying out to the Lord was working. But I realized that I need some additional support. And I think that's where sometimes we kind of forget, or we are, or we're ashamed to admit that sometimes we need to go a step further. And I think that's where the controversy comes in. That's where um, the conflict comes in, because people are like, well, if you go to the altar, that should be enough. And for some people, it is. Some other people need to go sit on a couch. I was one of those people. And so, in addition to the support that I was getting in church, I went to therapy as well. Again, my therapist was a Christian. So she, not that I would go into therapy and she would preach to me and all of those things. No, it's not that. But there were things that were from the psychological standpoint, where we would talk about diagnosis, and we would talk about symptoms, and we would talk about, well, where do you feel that in your body? We hate, if you're in therapy, that's a question you're gonna get every session. Well, where do you feel that, and how are you feeling? And you know did all of those things. But then there were times whenever she would be like, okay, let's pause and pray, let's pause and let's wait and see if the Holy Spirit has something to say, or what is the Lord speaking to you in this moment, or um all of those type of things. That is what I needed. That helped me with my mental health journey, and I'm still on the journey. Let's be clear about that. But those things helped me, because it was like I had to realize, and that's something I want to share on tonight. God can meet you on the couch. God can meet you in your therapist's office if you allow him in, and I did. So that is just one thing I want to share on tonight. I think sometimes as Christians, as believers, as women of God, I think that sometimes we are oftentimes too afraid or too ashamed to admit that we have or we currently struggle with our mental health because we feel like it's an insult to God, or we feel like it is. An insult to our walk with the Lord. And that is not the case. The same God that allows your primary care doctor to get their education and be able to use these certain tactics for healing and stuff like that. The psychologist, the therapist, the psychiatrist, all of them, they have, God is, pouring into them as well. And that was something that I feel like as a whole, we have to really, really come and accept that sometimes we need to go sit on the couch. We don't just need the altar. And like I said, the altar, amazing things happen at the altar. Breakthroughs happen at the altar. Yokes are destroyed at the altar. And I will forever, forever be an advocate for going to the altar, for getting your deliverance. Absolutely 100%. I am an intercessor. I am one that I pray for people at the altar. I do all of the things, but I also know that if you're going through something, whether it's trauma related or even some of the things that I've experienced, the anxiety, the depression, sometimes you need to go talk some things through. You need to talk through your experiences. You need to get tools. You need to get strategies. I always say, listen, I got some tools in my toolbox now. I got those tools in my toolbox from sitting on the couch. And there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make me less of a Christian. It doesn't make me less of a believer or a minister, none of those things. But I knew that for me, I needed some additional support. And maybe that's your story on tonight. Maybe you're in a place where you're saying, I pray, I talk to God, but I'm still sad. Or I pray and I talk to God and I'm still anxious. Or I pray and I talk to God and I read my Bible, but I still have flashbacks and nightmares of things that I've been through. Then maybe you need to get some additional support as well. I had to do it and I'm not ashamed of it. I want to encourage you tonight to get on your internet, and psychologytoday.com is a great resource where you can find a therapist. Um, I, I always talk about therapyforblackgirls.com. That's a resource you can use where you can find a therapist. If you want a Christian therapist, you can filter it and get that. If you don't, if you're like, listen, I need to separate it. I don't necessarily want to talk about anything but the books when I'm on the therapy couch. That's okay too. You can do that too. It's totally up to you. And that's the amazing thing about it, is that you have a choice. You can decide what works best for you. I just want you to be mentally well. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. I wanted I wanted to share on tonight just to let you know that just because you are a Christian and you love God doesn't mean that you cannot have a therapist as well. I wholeheartedly 100% promote therapy. I wholeheartedly 100% promote mental health advocacy because it's who I am. It's a part of, my message to the world. So tonight, I just wanted to really just briefly share my story. I wanted you to know that, we see the highlight reels on social media. We see the good stuff. We don't always see when people are at rock bottom. We don't always see whenever we have been in our most depressed state, or whenever, we're anxious for whatever reason. Or like I said, some people know that I've also struggled with PTSD in the past, just a couple years ago. Um, Back in 2022, I went through a pretty traumatic experience that caused PTSD for me. And so I had to navigate that. And that was one of the most challenging seasons of my life. And, as a result of that, I ended up with panic disorder where I would have panic attacks all the time. I don't know what I would have done if I was not in therapy at the time. I'm telling you, it saved my life. It changed my life. And I will forever, forever be grateful for my therapist. I will forever be grateful for the work that not only I put in, but the help that I received as a result of therapy. And I think about where I am now, whereas I'm not struggling with those things. I'm not having panic attacks anymore. I'm not having, PTSD symptoms. And it's because I learned to utilize both. I know how to go in my room and close my door and get a prayer through. I know how to bombard heaven. I know how to get in my word and be like, okay, Lord, what would you have me to know today? Because I have ABC 1, 2, 3 going on. I know how to do both. And that's something that I wanted to share on tonight. I want you guys to know that it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to prioritize your mental health. And so that's my story when it comes to being an advocate for mental health. I wanted to come on tonight to let you know that, you know what, church girls get depressed too. We don't always have it together. We're not perfect. We struggle just like the next person. Um, and sometimes we have to go sit on a couch too. And so, if this resonated with you on tonight, I want you to like, comment, share this message with a friend because maybe they don't know or they don't realize that it's okay to say that you love the Lord, but you also have a therapist. Or you love the Lord and you also take medication. And you love the Lord and you have a psychiatrist. It is perfectly okay. Like I said, we see it all the time. It's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay not okay. When you're not feeling okay, I tell people all the time, if you don't have a therapist, and maybe therapy isn't something that's accessible to you, um, perhaps if you don't have access to a therapist, there's other ways that you can advocate for yourself and advocate for your mental health. Sometimes that looks like community, having people in your life. Then when you're having a depressed day, where you can say, hey sis, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going through this. I'm really struggling with this. Can you assist me? These are things, and that's something that I had to learn. I now have an amazing community. I have an amazing support system. I have great friends. But, because I have those great friends, guess what? I can talk through my feelings. Those depressive episodes don't last long because I have people in my life that if I can pick up my phone and I can say, Tina, pray for me. Can you please pray for me? I got this going on. And I don't have to wallow and I don't have to stay in that state, because sometimes I can pray for myself, but maybe I didn't feel a release. Maybe I didn't feel, it lifting. So guess what? I have an inner circle of people that I can reach out to. If that's not something that you have right now, then seek it out. Find out what you have in your community where you can develop community. Um, Also, that looks like setting boundaries. Sometimes we stressed out and anxious because we haven't learned the art of no. Baby, no is a complete sentence. Listen, learn to tell people no. Don't overextend yourself. Whenever you need to back away, do just that. I just want y'all to know on tonight that guess what? Church girls aren't perfect. We get depressed too. We get anxious too. We have diagnoses too. Some people take medication too. And it's no judgment here. Here on the Unmuted Conversations podcast, we don't judge. We listen and we do not judge. We share our story here openly and honestly. And I wanted to make sure I did that one tonight. Like I said, every other time you hear from us, we have people on sharing their story. And I realized that I can't have other people on here sharing my story and then I'm mute about mine. I believe in speaking up. I believe in unmuting myself. So guess what? I wanted to make sure I did that on tonight. And so thank you for giving me the space, for allowing me to share my story with you guys on tonight. Like I said, like, comment, and share because I want everyone to know that it's okay if you have God and a therapist too. I'm going to wrap up tonight's show. I have loved our time together on tonight. There's so many exciting things coming from the Unmuted Conversations podcast, just from my brand in general. I do have some exciting news I'm going to be sharing within the next week or two. So please stay tuned. Definitely spread the word about what's going on here. If I've said something that resonated with you on tonight, feel free to reach out to me. You can follow me on Instagram at unmuted_conversations. Conversations. If you want to reach out, if you have a story, if you want to share your story with me, or if you want to be a guest on my podcast, you can always send me an email. The email address is unmutedconversations@gmail.com. That is unmuted conversations all together, no spaces, at gmail.com. I would love, love, love to speak with you. I would love to connect with you. I would love to see if we're a good fit. If you are interested in being a guest on my show, we talk about everything from faith, family, friendship, and a whole lot of mental health. So thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me on tonight. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. Like I said, please stay connected. Please share. Please tell somebody about us. I'll see you soon. Good night.